Good. So that's kicking in. I'll get the countdown. Okay. Man, it's been a good long while since I've been able to do something live on YouTube. This is pretty exciting. Whitney, when did
Yes.
you start live? When did you start live streaming for the first time?
Oh goodness, it's been years now. It's
Okay.
in 2022, and yeah,
Okay.
Oh wow.
it
I
was
think
horrifying when I first did it, but now I'm used to it.
you're a seasoned
Yeah.
pro.
Yeah. 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 I started in 2021 in the pandemic times.
All right. Well, guys, I started in March 2025. So
Today.
better late, better late
Welcome.
than never. Better late than never. This is the first time for everything.
pretty
For people that are
much.
joining us, thanks a lot for being flexible to jump in this live stream rather than the one we had originally planned to do on LinkedIn. It turns out that when you have colleagues in different parts of the world, with different time zones, miscommunications happen, and when you need to reach them, they happen to be asleep. But the three of us that are here. We are all very awake and very excited to talk about the different insights we've been extracting. We do have KubeCon coming up soon. Whitney, will you be traveling to KubeCon in London?
Heck yeah, I am. I'm crossing an ocean for KubeCon.
Very good.
Amazing.
I will be crossing a body of water, but not as big as the one that you'll be crossing coming from Spain to the UK. And then of
I'll
course
just
we
have
have
to cross
Amit.
land.
Yeah,
I'll
Amit,
just have
you'll
to
be
cross
jumping on a train. Yeah,
land.
getting to the other side of town. And good. Well, I want to welcome everybody. For Thank you for joining us. We're going to be running through some slides and just to get ourselves intro and out of the way. Amit, do you want to explain to folks who you are, what you do?
Yeah, sure. So, hi, I'm Amit. I'm a colleague of Bart's here at Lancates, and primarily I work with sponsors and brands on helping them meet their ICP, connect with our audience, make sure the right kind of content is meeting our audience, and yeah, helping them achieve their objectives essentially. So yeah, hi, nice to meet everyone.
And you are based in.
I am based in London. Well, I'm allowed to say that to people who are not from London, but technically I'm just outside of London. So yeah, I'm looking forward to KubeCon. I don't have to go far this time compared to Salt Lake City. So yeah, should be good.
Very good. Next up, Whitney, who are you?
Hello, I'm Whitney. My job is to talk a lot about cloud native technologies, and I do. Whether or not I say good things is subjective, but I am a developer advocate. I actually just started last week working at Datadog. This is the first time I'm mentioning it publicly, actually. I need to
Very
update
excited
my
for you.
LinkedIn.
Congrats.
I'm very
Yes.
excited too. And then I host a bunch of shows, a bunch of streaming shows. I hosted one called Enlightening. I host one called You Choose. I host a podcast. I speak at conferences. I make a lot of content and learn a lot of stuff and talk to amazing people, not unlike yourself, Bart.
I am desperately trying to keep up with you, Whitney, and failing miserably. But much respect. Very excited to hear about the job update and all the things that you're going to be doing there with Datadog. Yeah,
Me too.
and because we were talking when we just got started about creating content, but you are one of the most prolific people in this ecosystem, and I say that as maybe the 35th most prolific people in this
Whatever.
ecosystem.
I think you have me beat. I don't know.
No, I don't
First
know.
of all, it's
Anyway,
not a competition. Second
it
of all,
isn't.
yeah.
It is not a competition.
Let's
Um,
arm wrestle at KubeCon and decide once
we
and
could
for
do
all.
we could do that.
Whitney
Settle
will
the
definitely
score.
win
Yeah,
that.
left. Yeah, I got Whitney winning that. But anyway, for those of you who don't know me, my name is Bart Farrell. I'm the host of Cube FM, which is a podcast where we talk to engineers about all the cool stuff that they're doing on Kubernetes. We're now in our fifth season. I'm also a CNCF ambassador, and apparently, my claim to fame today is that I interviewed over 300 people in 2024
Heck
through
yeah.
our regular content that comes out once a week, as well as doing lots and lots of interviews at KubeCon, which is actually what we're going to be talking about a fair amount today. For folks that aren't familiar with the Learn K8s network, there are different branches. It's not just KubeFM. We have Cube events. So if you have an event that's related to Kubernetes, you can get it posted on there. We'll get you some visibility. K3S Daily for folks that are more focused on that. If you're looking for a job or if you're trying to hire, we have Kube Careers. We have Kube Architect for folks that are more interested in app development on Kubernetes. Kubesploit for all the security folks out there. And then just the regular bread and butter Learn K8s. We also have a newsletter that comes out every week with all cool kinds of articles and blogs and great technical stuff out there. So that's kind of us in a nutshell for some people that may not be familiar. LearnK8s originally started as a training organization in 2017, continues to do so for folks that are trying to level up. And so if that's something of interest, you can always check that out more in detail. In today's session, like, as I said in the beginning, was initially supposed to be on LinkedIn, but instead we're doing it. We'll do it live here on YouTube. What we're going to be covering findings from the 60 plus interviews that we did in Salt Lake City when Amit crossed the pond to go to the US on a very short trip. Talking about the top performing interviews and categories, what things did well and why. Insights and strategic takeaways, and then also just some very practical tips for high impact interviews. And throughout the course of this conversation, we'll be going back and forth between the three of us, looking at things from different perspectives. And of course, we invite you to share any questions that you may have in the chat. You can also find any one of the three of us on LinkedIn, Kubernetes, Slack, CNCF Slack, etc. We're always interested in talking to folks about what's going on. If you disagree with us, please let us know. That's always interesting too. That being said, like I said, we did over 60 interviews at the last KubeCon. It was pretty crazy. We are currently scheduling interviews for the next KubeCon. Whitney, do you know what kind of swag you're going to have at the Datadog booth?
No, I barely know. I barely know where the bathrooms are at Datadog. I just started.
One day at a time. One day at a time. I mentioned this because we're going to do specific swag review videos at KubeCon. So if you want us to swing by your booth to record a bit about what kind of crazy socks or stickers you got, we'll be doing that. But of course, we also do technical interviews. We do interviews around announcements when companies want to update our community about the stuff that they're doing. So these are the kind of things that we did with lots of different brands, with small startups with 5 employees all the way up to very large organizations like Akamai, AWS, Google, etc. So yeah, this is what we're referring to when we're talking about the interviews that we did. You can find them on cube.fm. You can also see them on this wonderful YouTube channel where we're hosting the live stream today. But this is what we're going to be digging into a little bit more. All right. So Amit, take it away. What are these numbers?
Sure. So thanks, Bart. So, as Bart said, we did a number of technical interviews, announcement interviews during KubeCon Salt Lake City. So we've got all of that data and analysis which we can lean on. But also, I think, our entire community, where we're lucky enough to share great technical content across all the channels that Bart's just been through. So we're taking that data, we're looking at it, we're analyzing it, and we're hopefully sharing a few things that you can learn from today and take forward into your own interview preparation. What we're going through today here really is the data from KubeCon Salt Lake City, the interviews that we did that time around, and seeing what we've learned and perhaps, seeing what we'll be able to share with you today. So you can see the insights from our network, everything that we've gathered from December. And Bart, if you want to skip over to the next slide.
I would love to.
Thank you very
Cool.
much.
Yeah.
We've also then dived into that. So, what's really interesting, or what we find interesting anyway, and hopefully, you guys will as well, the actual topics and the trends that we've been seeing. We've been seeing a lot of different popularity trends, category trends. We've seen, what might be more popular in terms of when there's a different kind of speaker. And what we've done is we've taken that information, we've put it together, and we're going to share a few things with you today. So yeah, looking forward to it. And Bart, if you want to head over to the next one. So, firstly, popularity analysis. Be interesting for us to see that, in terms of the popular interviews, we saw a really clear trend. And before I go into that, it'd be interesting, Whitney, perhaps, we're going through what we're seeing from our analysis, from our interviews and through our bubble, but from the interviews, the talks and the channels that you run, what are you seeing in terms of any trends or popular topics that you're talking to people about in the community?
In my experience, in the videos I make, there are a couple of things. Like sometimes there are hot topics, absolutely, like platform engineering. But then there's also kind of a cliff where everyone kind of figures out that it's a hot topic and then it becomes saturated. So then, so getting the topic like as it's on the way up. And then another thing is, my content sometimes does better, especially over a long period of time, if it's a wider scoped topic, or than if you're like super niche digging in on a detail.
Got it. Yeah, that makes complete sense. And actually, it's funny you said that, because I think you'll see on the next slide, and we'll go there in a second. But we see similar trends as well, where people or companies will really dive on popular topics, but very quickly it becomes really saturated. So, it's
Yeah.
really important to actually find um, consistently and quickly those content niches to be able to quickly change when you reach that kind of point of saturation. I mean, looking at our most popular interviews, it looks like challenges and how best to optimize your Kubernetes infrastructure came out on top with our most popular interview. Congrats to, I think it's Nathan at AWS. Congrats. Maybe Bart will spare a free T-shirt for you at some point during a KubeCon. But they got a massive click-through rate. So brands were obviously looking at liking the content, clicking through, and interested in what Nathan was saying. But yeah, Bart, if you want to skip over to the next one.
Got it.
Thank you. So again, if Winnie, to your point, say platform engineering, 13 interviews, they're really, they're popular topics. But exactly as you said, you get to a point where, okay, this is a really popular topic, but hey, we've got 13 different, and now probably more companies talking about it. How do we quickly change topic? And do you have any advice for companies who are doing that, who are focused on something and then need to quickly change? Should they go to something that's immediately relevant, or perhaps take a complete different track in terms of content?
I think what is helpful is like, instead of worrying about what everyone else is doing necessarily, like if you focus on your own problems and you're like, oh, so I am following the advice of everyone, and then now I hit against this blocker. Let's talk about that. Because then you're on the forefront of what's coming. Because if everyone's taking all that advice, you're all going to hit that same blocker at that same time. So being open and honest and genuine about what you're actually going through is going to help you make great content.
That's really interesting. And Bart, when you're doing these, we've listed platform engineering, infrastructure, resource optimization, but when you're actually conducting these interviews and you're listening to the people, do the interviewees and companies tend to find their own topics within these categories, or within these titles? Do they find their own kind of aspect of it?
I would say the good ones do. It's interesting. I don't know how it is for you, Whitney, because you bring other people onto your program, because everybody will approach this in different ways, but generally speaking, the more nuanced and the more it sounds that you're speaking from firsthand experience, I would say the better. There's a I think there's sometimes a temptation with, as Whitney was mentioning, things that are really trendy, just talk about this massive paradigm of platform engineering and speak about things in a, I would say, very sort of generalistic way. Whereas when I'm listening to somebody and they're immediately telling me about a very specific problem that they themselves have faced, and admitting, as a part of the human condition, that not everyone's perfect, and that there are difficulties and things that they struggle with, I find that our audience will identify with that much better, both in terms of the interview stuff that we do, as well as our regular podcast episodes, where people often talk about when something breaks or when something didn't go well, and that it's not all just roses when it comes to the
Uh-huh.
situations that they're facing. So I often find that pinning something down very specifically, which then I think also, what I always tell our guests is that the more technical you are, the more people are going to understand you, the more they're going to respect you, the more they're going to be interested in having a further conversation with you. So take this as an opportunity not to speak about big sweeping trends, but really specifics about things that they've noticed and things that they've worked on.
Makes sense. Yeah, I
What
think that's great.
do you agree or do you disagree? Are we going to arm wrestle?
The answer to the third question is definitely yes, regardless of. I
It'll be our
yeah, I
second
think
live stream.
I think I agree with what you're saying. I think there's a balance to everything in life. It depends, right? Is the always the answer. Sometimes if you dig too into a super duper niche use case, you lose people because other people don't have exactly that system architecture that you do to run into that problem. But overall, if you're having the problem, chances are other people are having the problem. And if you're bold enough to talk about it, then chances are other people are not bold enough to talk about it and really happy to listen to you talk about it.
Very good point.
Yeah,
I love that.
that's a really good point. And just remind ourselves these these titles, these subjects, these areas of discussion are based on our data. So it's based on the 60 interviews that we've seen. Question to you both, really, and again, arm wrestle to see who goes first. But how are you seeing things now? Have things changed? Are you seeing topics perhaps change in the build up to KubeCon London? Yeah, it would be interesting to find out if you're actually seeing a difference in the trend that's happening.
All right, Whitney, you have to talk about AI before I do, because I'm just going to copy your answer.
I'm so tired of AI. Wait, I was gonna go. What I was thinking was more about platform engineering because that's more my world than AI is my
Cool.
world. Platform engineering in 2022, it was just like kind of barely what is platform engineering, and it's kind of grown from that to now. The content I'm making for Platform Engineering Day was what conditions should be present for your platform adoption to be successful. So what does your company even look like? So it's a much more niche use case, but still pretty broadly applicable to the space. Is that in the vein of the question you were asking?
Yeah,
Certainly so.
definitely.
Okay.
Yeah, definitely.
Certainly so. And from adoption trends, or we're looking at that, or hype cycles of people are talking about something, but how many people are actually doing it? How many concrete examples can we find of that? People saying they're doing something without really doing it. We've seen this time and time again, and it's interesting too with the AI trend, because I feel like it was also in 2023 that it was talked about. Then it kind of died down. Then it came, and now it's obviously very much come back. And that there's a bit of a struggle then to find but we're finding more and more examples of that. We'll probably talk about that later on. But I definitely think there's something to be said for like I said, in the build up to this, people feel like they have to have something to say about it. So then if you're not talking about platform engineering, then you're going to become irrelevant. But as I think whether you're a kid in high school who's willing to have a mohawk and dye it green, or being at KubeCon and saying, this is the topic that I want to focus on, I'm not just going to succumb to the pressure to be in a trend. I think there's something to be said for that.
I have something else I want to add, and that is it's not just the amount of content that's about a trend, let's say platform engineering, that's exploding. It's also the number of tools, the number of open source projects, the number of actual companies implementing it, the number of products being made around platform engineering. All of those things are growing as well as the content. So there is more to cover, but it's also can get saturated and harder to navigate.
Also true.
Yeah, very good points. Okay, thank you very much. Thank you both
for
answering those in great detail. So cross-category insights, I think we can pretty much see that infrastructure combined with anything right now is a really popular thing to talk about. What I'd really love to focus on is our findings from leadership interviews, where when we were interviewing people and it was someone from perhaps leadership, a C-suite, and perhaps around that kind of level, we found a trend that interviews were generally received better and they were more popular. Now, again, this is based on the data that we've seen following Salt Lake City. So, Whitney, I'm going to hand it over to you first. It's maybe two-part question. A, why would you think that perhaps is? And B, do you think that's something that's more widely happening? Or feel free to care to challenge, our data here. Is that just perhaps a little bubble that we're seeing?
I want to answer your question with a question, and that is, who is your audience? So it sounds like your audience maybe is other leadership folks, which is why the leadership interviews are doing the best for you.
Well, it's actually not, because our audience is really a technical audience, but and this is me just thinking kind of on top of my feet, but perhaps, Bart, I know you do a good job in terms of preparation for these interviews and really drilling home how technical the content should be, and to rely on that technical sense of whatever the business is doing and focus on that expertise. I wonder, and again, I don't know, I wonder if it's the way that technical content is perhaps delivered in a structured, coherent way. Again, I don't know, up for discussion, but maybe that's my immediate thought on because Whitney, you make a good point. It's, perhaps it would be more geared to, if we had a managerial audience or whoever it might be, but it's actually quite the opposite, I suppose. But I don't know what you think.
Bart thinks a lot of things. But
Yeah.
no, but I think, but I think there is something to be. What I would say is that people that are in leadership positions perhaps are more accustomed to, because of formulating their thoughts
Mm,
and giving the structure, the beginning,
Yeah.
the middle, and the end. Than, it's part of their job is to be, public
Hmm.
facing. I just did an interview today with a CEO, and you can tell that he's been trained on how to do this. And in terms of all the things that need to incorporate, he didn't even have to look at his notes. And
yeah.
the CEO of a company that's been in the ecosystem since 2021, so it's not his first rodeo in terms of doing interviews and things of that nature. Regarding the technical aspects, what I will often tell people in terms of preparation, and we'll speak more about things about preparation for interviews later on, but when I say it's like, if in terms of, imagine that you're standing with three or four people after a meetup and you've given a talk, and now people are asking you questions, and so you have the opportunity to maybe go deeper on some of the points that you covered in your talk. Everyone's there with their pizza and their drink of choice, and you don't really feel like there's any pressure to that you're not catering to an entire audience, but really being direct about the specific examples that you want to go deeper on. Is it saying like, this is your chance to sort of nerd out on all these things? Like this,
Mm,
these are the things that people respond to. There's also the element, and I'm curious about Whitney's thoughts about this, that hot takes do well. So whether you're talking
Yeah.
about your business model, if you're using open source, if you're not using open source, how you're doing that, if you're talking about certain paradigmatic shifts, if you make statements like Kubernetes is just Linux, that's one of our highest performing podcasts, which generated a lot of debate on
mhm.
Reddit. Those are kind of things that'll catch people's attention. I and so I think there's a certain element of being accustomed to delivering messages, and so like that, perfect practice makes perfect in a way.
Mm,
And then also the relatability factor.
mm,
Do people feel
Hmm.
like, if it feels or sounds like, and as someone who works in communication and marketing, if it feels or sounds like something that's marketing related, it's not going to do well. And
Hmm.
and so sometimes I've asked guests to say like, can you say that again, but really just focus on the technical aspects. If you're mentioning the name of your company every 5 seconds, it's not going to do well. I
yeah.
can promise you that. I know we're jumping ahead because we'll mention this later.
Mhm.
Whitney, what are your thoughts on this?
I think there's something to open, honest, and genuine for sure, and just speaking from the heart, and also people who are practiced at speaking from the heart,
Mm.
ironically, right? Like they're I had something else to say about it, and I think I lost it. But
It'll come back to you.
yeah, it'll come back to me.
It'll come back to you.
Okay.
As I
Hmm.
say, I think there's a trend we're talking about in terms of being used to perhaps speaking. Go
It
on,
came
let me
back to
hear.
me
Okay.
about the storytelling element. I just
Mm,
wanted to say that storytelling can be really subtle. Like it can be as easy as asking a question before answering your own question. So there's a pause and someone has a chance in their own mind to wonder before hearing the answer, as opposed to just spilling the information without any nuance or shape or intrigue involved with it.
That's it. And I would argue, when you say speaking from the heart, but well rehearsed and well practiced, that's a super good
Uh-huh.
point. It's because I find that the storytelling aspects, not necessarily CEOs, because some are, but maybe they're senior product managers or people that have quite a high position, so they're used to doing this. Is that the storytelling aspect? You do feel like there's a beginning, middle, and end. You feel like when you're listening that there's almost bullet points happening there. That the information is delivered in such a way that you're like, okay, I'm getting it. There's logic to this, and
Uh-huh.
it's not like you're answering just because you have to answer, but there's a well-developed thought process behind it. So it's something that you can pick up on quite quickly when you're talking to somebody.
mm,
Cool.
great.
Shall we move to the next slide?
Yeah, I think so. And just before Bart, just hand over to you, I think we've gone through probably very quickly and at a high level a lot of the data and the trends and stuff. But if anyone who is listening or watching this wants to dive in further and needs support on the content, or wants to just to ask questions around content and how relevant or where there might be gaps be, then please do get in touch. Just drop us a note or anything like that, and we'll be happy to share more. But
Absolutely.
onto
We
the
love
tips.
talking to people. Contact us. Yes.
We love it. Awesome. Over to you, Bart.
Yeah. So in terms of insights, like I said, we've already focused on this. Our second bullet point: niche focus within platform engineering to differentiate content because of saturation. It's better to really focus on hone in on something specific. Multi-category interviews. Yeah. So when you can bring in show knowledge about other trends, so that people are aware of having an array of different topics that you can focus on. Looking at the last one about, it's interesting that my background was in data on Kubernetes, and in 2020 and 2021, it was really difficult to get any conversation started about data on Kubernetes. But now it seems like these are gaining more traction. More and more people are running stateful workloads on Kubernetes, and so they want to hear from people that are doing that. So we've actually had quite a few conversations about database operators, about things in the analytics space. When we talk about AI, I think there ends up being a certain amount of overlaps with folks that are running stateful workloads that are sort of more data conscious. Kubernetes not necessarily being built for these workloads, but more and more of these workloads finding their way on there. In the security side, there's is everybody interested in security? Not necessarily, but security folks certainly are. And then there's the other aspects, of trends like shifting left, making developers more security conscious from day zero, things of that nature. And so yeah, like I said, these are things that that have definitely come across our radar from a technical perspective. But once again, it's a very vast ecosystem. When we talk about Kubernetes, and the term expert comes up. Who is a Kubernetes expert? How many Kubernetes experts do we know? Whitney and I know tons and tons of talented people that have been working with this technology, some of them 10 years. How many of them would call themselves experts? I don't know. Whitney, what does it mean to be a Kubernetes expert?
I think the more people know, the less likely they are to call themselves an expert. So if you meet someone who's definitely like, oh no, I'm not an expert, that's probably
like,
your
yeah,
expert.
it's a good sign. It's a good sign that they are. I really like that. It's very much the Teddy Roosevelt speak softly and carry a big stick. That's good. I like that.
Yeah.
So in terms of things that we talk about for recordings, what we do when we're meeting with guests is that we give them all the questions we're going to ask them ahead of time, so that there are no surprises. If you're doing an interview and you don't get the questions ahead of time, ask for them, so that you can have some time to be able to prepare your answers, so you can link them to things that are relevant. It's like anything. Are you going to sell an enterprise level license deal because of an interview directly? Probably not. Your goal is to get people to the next step. So it's, like curiosity, interest, attention, building that sort of pipeline of different actions or different steps that are going to be taking. So be thinking, what do I need to say for this person to reach out and say that they'd like to know more? What kind of technical knowledge? What kind of understanding of pain points? That's something that I emphasize a lot too in conversations is, what is it, oftentimes in this ecosystem, we see technologies where we're like, maybe you're answering a question that nobody really asked. Are people actually really suffering from that? Or maybe this technology is just coming too early, and it's the market's not ready for that. But on the preparation side, having entire sentences written down and trying to do that verbatim will be more stressful. Not recommended at all. So don't do that. But just like very specific points where you want to mention a particular customer, end user, some kind of proof of concept that you're working on, things like that. That's okay. In the case of our interviews that are not live, like this live stream right now, you have the ability that it's recorded. So if you say your answer and you're not sure, I'm not going to tell you that you can't do it again, right? This is your opportunity. So don't worry about it. Like, make sure that you get to say all the things that you want to say. Regarding technical considerations, yeah, try to be in an area that's well lit. If you have access to a decent microphone, make sure that your dog or other people that you cohabitate with aren't going to be making a lot of noise, because that can be disruptive. And it's always good to check your tech setup, a few minutes before you get started. Whitney, any tips that we're missing?
I like to leave room for some organic conversation because I think that open, honest dialogue is really important. So when I do interviews, I do have some like must-have things that I want to dig in on, but I also have some nice to haves. And on that must-have, sometimes I have like question one and question two, and I ask question one, and then question one inspires a question 1A, like inspires
Mm-hmm.
its own tree, conversation tree. And I want to leave space in my interview format to let that happen and not walk away from an interesting topic because I have to get the question too.
100%, 100%.
Yeah.
And you realize that, on the go. And so that's when,
Mm-hmm.
for example, when I did this recording today with the CEO, I explained these are the questions that I'm definitely going to ask you. But then while we're talking, I said, hey, I know this is not in the script, but this is sort of a bonus question. Since you mentioned this, can we talk about that? And
Yeah.
it's added value for the person being interviewed. If they really don't want to answer, that's okay. Also, all the content that we produce, we share before it goes live. So if someone's not comfortable with something, it can be removed. If we really have to, we can re-record. So just something that we want to keep out there in the open. But and I also find really fun too, like, it may sound silly, but getting people to talk about things that aren't necessarily 100% Kubernetes related about,
Mm-hmm.
when you're not doing all this stuff, what do you like to do in your free time? And they say, oh, I like rock climbing,
Mm-hmm.
or I like painting, or I like doing this or that. Sometimes those more human things that then other people can relate to makes it even better or more likely that someone's going to reach out, because they're like, well, it was cool what you said about observability. But when I found out that you also like, Star Trek reruns, well, I'm also a massive Trekkie, and so I want to, talk to you about all the who played Spock the best or whatever happens to be. So I think these are like those more human elements too. For me, is something I find very enriching, and I think it adds a nice touch. So yeah, I think that can be helpful as well. Let's take a look. Other things for, in the case of our interviews, if people want to do branding, this is a chance to rock your swag. Using natural pauses always gives a nice space for ideas to sink in. So those things can be good too. As someone who has difficulty pausing, I can say that they're very powerful.
Uh-huh.
Things that we see
I
as
like
well.
I like to use I like hand gestures. My
Oh
hands
yeah.
always are like, enforcing what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, it gives that something added to kind of look at, doesn't it? You're like, yeah, I'm trying to get my point across, and Bart, pauses work great for you. I think that's what, I've never heard you speak so
The thing is, I've heard different with hands. It depends on the
Uh-huh.
context. In this
Yeah.
particular context, everything that I've read, because like over 80% of communication, is nonverbal, things like that, is that hands in a online situation, particularly if you're in a small little box, can get quite overwhelming. Because if you think about the real estate that you see here just on this screen, if I have my hands moving, then that can become quite distracting. It doesn't mean that they're not good to use, but perhaps to use sparingly.
Yeah.
Whitney, in your case, when you do a lot of your content, you're standing up, so there's a
Mm-hmm.
different kind of frame around that. And then obviously if you're on stage too, but
Yeah.
if you're specifically doing something online, hands can be useful. But just bear in mind that for the audience, if you start doing like a lot of this, it can get even a little bit overwhelming. Most people are pretty respectful. I think we've done so many online calls now because of the pandemic days that it's not a big deal.
Yeah.
Other things, yeah, make sure that you look at the camera, not the screen. Um, if you have glasses on, definitely turn the brightness down on your screen so it's not reflecting a lot in your glasses, because that can be kind of a bad look. These are just sort of basic housekeeping things. Go ahead, Whitney.
I have a tip for people who aren't used to streaming and have trouble remembering to look at their camera.
Yeah.
And that is, if you can get the thumbnails, like whatever you want to look at, whether it's yourself or the other speaker, if you can put that as close as you can to the camera,
Great
then
tip.
at least when you look away from the camera, you're looking close, you're still in the vicinity.
Good call.
Great
Definitely good
trip.
call.
Yeah, great tip.
And I think also, once again, this comes down to practice. So if you're not sure,
Mhm.
maybe with a coworker, you say like, "Hey, can I just run through this quickly with you to make sure that it sounds okay, or that I guarantee that I'm getting all the things in there." Stuff that we
Mhm.
didn't mention, and you only realize this when you've been recorded. What are the things that you'll use as fillers? Like, so, anyway, all right. We all have them, and they can be extremely difficult to get rid of. But if you don't get feedback from somebody, you're probably not going to be aware of them at all. So asking somebody like, hey, I've got an interview coming up. Would you mind watching me do it and giving me some notes and some feedback? Definitely worth a try, I would say.
If you think you're going to be in this public facing situation often, it might be worth joining an organization like Toastmaster, where they
Mhm.
actually practice with each other. Uh-huh.
Agreed. My dad was actually started the Toastmasters Club in my elementary school, so I benefited from that a lot as a
Oh,
child.
heck
Oh,
yeah,
Yeah, it's
that
good. It's
explains
good.
that
And
explains, that explains a few things.
it does.
shout out to my dad. Shout out to my dad. I gave him the link to watch his live stream. I hope he sees it. So much to be proud of. But it's true is that I think it's shown in statistics that most people would rather go skydiving or swim with sharks rather than speak in public. People are
Mm.
terrified of doing it. It's completely normal and human to not enjoy this. And so if you don't do it that often, yeah, it's going to be unpleasant. You're going to want to get through it. And then, but you're not going to be doing the very thing that you want to be doing, which is getting that next conversation, which is getting
I
people to
read
think about what you're trying to take more seriously. Sorry, Whitney.
I read that people evolved to dislike attention, like public speaking, because like when humans traveled in groups, if you were human and all the attention was on you, that was a bad thing. Like that was bad for your survival. It, so that we evolved to not like this type of attention, or most people don't.
Interesting.
Yeah,
I
that
hadn't
is
heard
very
that.
interesting.
Yeah, I'll have to check that
Hmm.
out. Good. Okay, cool. Well, I think we've got just a little bit of time left. We will be doing these sessions more regularly to look at the insights that we're extracting so that people can see the stuff that's going on in our network. We just wanted to give a quick shout out to the different brands that we work with for all the wonderful content that they've helped us produce and continue to produce, whether it's in KubeCon or the different year-round engagements that we have in webinars, through our newsletter, interviews that we do, because we don't just do stuff at KubeCon, we do things year round, have conversations with cool people. But that was pretty much it in terms of the stuff that we wanted to cover today. And looking forward, now we're setting up all of our interviews for KubeCon and getting ready for that. So plenty of things to do in the next couple of weeks. Whitney, when are you arriving in London?
I arrived before Rejects, so on the
Ooh,
29th,
very good.
I'm going to get there, and I'll be there for the whole thing. Yes.
Very
Brilliant.
good. Cool. Well, we will see you there very soon. Thanks for joining us today, Whitney. Looking forward to see you in your official capacity in Datadog and check out the cool swag you have after we arm wrestle. And Amit, enjoy not having to travel very far, and we'll see you soon in London.
I will look forward to seeing
Awesome.
you both.
All right. Love you.
Bye.
Take care. Have a great one.
Bye.
Bye.
Cool.
Okay, good.
All good?
Are y'all happy with that?
Hell yeah.
Oh,
Super
it's
good.
brilliant.
It's really, really
Yeah.
good.